Good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is Kathleen Ehlers, and today is May 16th, Tuesday, it being 6:01. I will open the meeting of the Finance Subcommittee. We're gathered in the George Romm Little Theater at Brockton High School, and I will now establish a quorum. Ms. Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Homer?
Here.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Here.
Ms. Azak?
Here.
Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
And I'm Kathleen Ehlers as the Vice Chair, and I'm here as well. The first and only item on the agenda tonight is the fiscal year '24 budget. And I will pass the floor to Mr. Pertonio, but I don't know if you want to go through these talking points or if you want me to
Sure.
go through some of them.
We can go back and
Yeah.
forth on them.
Okay?
Basically, I just wanted to update the committee on yesterday. The pink slips and blue slips went out to the certified staff. As I see, everyone's probably heard, and they've watched the news and so on. We're looking for the minimum of 130 to balance out next year's budget, but in seeing enrollment drop, we need to look beyond that. So we have no idea what the enrollment will be for next year, but we need to plan that there could be, other students leaving the district also. So as we go through and as people leave for other jobs, other positions, we'll look to see whether or not those need to be replaced or how we can reorganize. Again, we want to keep our balance between our staffing and our student enrollment. So next on the agenda for the slips that was the certified staff. So now we have to look at the non-certified. Basically all the other unions, all the one-to-one employee contracts, and the rest of the system. So we have until about June 1st on most of those to get our decision out. So with the superintendent and the executive team, we are reviewing the positions and the staffing levels where we can make adjustments and cuts. And by the next meeting, we should have a pretty good idea of who we're going to basically pink slip or blue slip change on those positions to get us balanced in the budget.
And the deadline on that is June 1st.
Yes, for most of the contracts have a June 1st. Some have the last day of school, but for our own budgeting purposes, we want to be able to, before we go to City Council, which will be the second week of June, I think, this year. It's usually the first week. We want to be able to basically say we have our budget balanced and we're in place.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the non-net school spending?
Yes, we really haven't spent any time on that. So I know earlier in the year, we spoke about the fact that our busing costs were escalating over what we had budgeted, and it was primarily due to the McKinney-Vento homeless transportation costs. We've had an uptick in the number of students who are considered now homeless. There was a moratorium lifted back in September on families that were renting apartments, and so evictions of people who couldn't pay their rent since the whole COVID freeze was in place. So with that uptick, more and more families became homeless, and so anyone that was in Brockton, that's fine, we picked them up with our own buses, but anyone that was moved to another city or went to another location, under the McKinney-Vento Act, we have to go get them and bring them back. So we saw about a $2 million increase in the costs in going out of doing that. And our number of special ed stops and pickups and students have increased this year. And those require a smaller, we call them vans, but they're like the half-size buses. So we required more of those, more stops, so in turn meant more routes, more drivers. So we saw those costs going up. Other than those costs, the rest of the department functioned as we had budgeted. The number of personnel, the number, the amount of, basically the amount of fuel. But it's those outside vendors, which we have over 100 of them that go out and pick up these students. And some of them can be very expensive. We go all the way to Fall River. We go to, the outskirts of Boston to pick up students and bring them back. So, and those turn out to be quite costly. So if we want to go to that portion of the budget book, I think it's the last 4 or 5 pages. You'll see the non-net budget.
Yep.
So we have basically the top part of the page, page 40, is the personnel costs for the department. We haven't made any changes there. And then the bottom half of the page are all of the operations costs, everything from the regular ed to the special ed to the vehicle repair and maintenance, the tools and hardware, gasoline. Fuel-wise, the price seems to be staying pretty steady, so we're hoping there's no real increase there. And then just our costs. We were lucky this year there wasn't much snow, so we did well on that portion. But again, it was offset by all the other costs that increased. So we are requesting more funding than last year from the city. So although we were looking to stabilize our costs on this, what have gone up are the costs we have no control over. The number of students that are homeless and the number of students that are special ed that we have to provide special transportation for. Otherwise, our pay rates, our salaries, everything has been in line with what we projected and on. So overall, we're looking for $14,784,000. That's up approximately $2.5 million from last year. So we're hoping that the city can meet that. If they can't meet that full amount, at least get us started, and during the year, we will work on trying to reduce those routes. We've this year purchased 5 minivans of our own to do some of that out-of-district transportation. They'll go to the farthest routes, the routes that were costing us $300, $400, $500 a day to go pick up students. So we'll do those with our own drivers. Those drivers are 7D drivers. They're a less expensive driver than a school bus driver, which has to have a CDL to drive. So we'll be looking at basically weighing it out, purchasing more of those vehicles, those minivans, and picking up more of those students to save ourselves cost. But we have quite a few of them. Our homeless went from 480 to about 1,000 students this year. And not all 1,000 need this transportation, but we're up quite a bit on the regular ones that we have. And the last 2 pages have a detail of those budgets, if anyone has any questions.
Do any of the committee members have any questions at this point on the non-net spending? Okay, and in light of, did you want to say something else, Mr. Petronio?
Last meeting, we reviewed all of the net school spending. We gave you new booklets that showed the cuts. If there's anything else anyone wants to discuss in there. Otherwise, I'll consider that's our need.
Yep.
And that's what the school committee will recommend that we need. And the same thing with the non-net, unless anyone has any cuts or changes. That would be what we, as a committee, we request of the city our budget, just like the police, the fire, every other department. We request of the city. That goes to the mayor and the city council. Well, it goes to the mayor and the CFO. And they, in turn, when they put their budget together, they present that to the city council. If the mayor decides he can't meet this budget, he'll reduce it and let us know and say, I can't give you the full amount, I can give you this amount. If that happens, we have to come back and we'll discuss how to adjust our budget to meet the amount that they've appropriated to us. Then it goes to city council, and hopefully they can't cut any individual line items, but they can just cut the amount in our budget. So the fact that we're pretty much funded at foundation budget, if they cut it this year, they have to put it back next year. So some districts that are wealthier have millions of dollars above foundation, so they have room to be cut. We're funded basically right at foundation. I usually add anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 extra, because to balance a $300 million budget and come within 0.25% is difficult. So we put a little bit of buffer in there, because whatever we're short this year in meeting, we have to make up next year. So if the state says our budget's $295 million, we have to spend $295 million. If we spend $294 million, they expect $1 million added to next year's budget. So we monitor that closely when we work very hard. And honestly, at the end of the year, when the time comes, if there's extra money, we'll buy laptops, we'll buy paper, things that we need for the district, so that we meet that amount, so that we don't get in trouble with the Department of Ed.
I think that's one of the biggest pieces of information that most people are, confused about, is the fact that when we have a budget that we've agreed to, we have to spend that budget. And if we don't spend that budget, we're in error. And so if you can talk a little bit about that, so the constituents can understand that, there's a process that is pretty prescriptive that we have to go through, and that is not our process, it's guided by the state.
Exactly. So we have our student database, which lists every student and everything about that student. That literally every other night is uploaded to the Department of Ed. So they have a continual vision of every school, of what you have. From that, they'll determine the cost of each student to educate. There's a base amount for everybody. Then if you're special ed, there's additional funds. If you're a low-income family, there's additional funds. If you're English language learner, there's additional funds. So with that, they come up with a rate. This year, Brockton's rate is $17,790 per student. That's the average, and they expect you to spend that amount of money on those students. Now, they would like the cities and towns to kick in more than that if they can. And honestly, there are some places like Cambridge that if their rate is $17,000, they'll put in $23,000 per student. They can afford it. We basically, in Brockton, have always just met that. Years ago, we had maybe $1 million over, but the past few years, we've been about $500,000 over is what they do. So when they give you those funds, they do expect the Department of Ed to see results. They don't want you to just spend the money to spend it. They want to see that if they're setting this goal for you to meet, that you've spent that money on the students and your outcome is, better grades or, meeting the state performance levels. So it's our job to make sure that we spend those monies fully, but towards the benefit of the students, towards their education, getting them what they need, whether it's after-school programs like homework helper, or whether it's more specialists, reading specialists, math specialists in the school to help them. So that's how they have that amount, and that's the reason why they set that you must spend it. They don't want you to shortchange the students after they've given you what's called the foundation budget level. They don't want to see them short. You have to do at least that amount. So again, the urban districts run close to that line. Some of the wealthier urban districts, they surpass that quite a bit. And that's, and our job is to make sure that we allocate those funds accordingly and that we do the best we can, for the students with the funds.
And to spend it judiciously.
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions in regards to that? Mr. Sullivan?
I had one on non-net spending, if I could.
Sure.
In the transportation department, the data specialists, I noticed it's gone up like 4 times as much than last year.
It's gone up.
Is that more people involved?
Oh,
On
yes, I'm pretty sure that's more.
page 41?
Page 41, let's see. I'm pretty sure that's more people. I don't know. Yes, there's additional people doing that. So we have the people that do the billing. We have the people that pay the private companies that are doing the vans for us. And in turn, we bill, we bill athletics for their trips. We bill some of the clubs for their trips. So that's all staff. There's people working all that. The title data specialist, kind of broad, but it's really, financial type people in the office. Oh, and bus routes, another one that data specialist works on all the bus routes, which we constantly update because our students move quite a bit, especially during the year. Every time they move, we have to adjust the bus route to go pick up new students.
What was there, one person last year, and now there's like 3 or 4?
Well, when we first started, we did half a bus fleet. So we only had one person that was doing that here. We had someone that was also working at the Parent Information Center doing the bus routes. So that person has since retired, and now we're doing it all here. But we went from a half bus fleet to a full bus fleet. And now we're expanding to beyond the full bus fleet, like I said, to the little minivans to do some of the private transportations.
Okay, thank you.
But for the next, those are all being looked at as we move into cuts for June 1st, like the staff and how many are needed, and so that's being reviewed now. Well, Mr. Petroni was right. We went from all vans to just buses, but we'll, that's all going to be reviewed.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions at this time? Mr. Rodriguez?
It's more of a comment. When I looked at the non-net and specifically, the transportation where when we look at when we had for a student doing all the transportation, you had 2 dispatchers. You know, one did the large buses, one did the smaller transportation. It's this, it raises eyebrows as why do we have 4? You know, and all the staff, you know, what is a community engagement specialist? What does that position consist of? So I know I requested that, you know, we do an audit of the transportation department to make sure that it's staffed adequately and then that we have people that are qualified in the positions that they have and, you know, and also looking at the salaries. It's a tough pill to swallow when we just lost 130 educators in the classroom and our transportation budget is just ballooning and ballooning.
Right.
Do we have people that don't belong in that? So it's more of a statement, and then I know we've discussed this and we'll get to the bottom of that, hopefully.
Right, we can look at that, and just so the public knows, the transportation money cannot be used for education and vice versa. So if there were extra funds here, I can't just move it to use on the education piece. And the same thing, I can't use any education money to cover any of those costs here. So, yes, the scheduling of the staff, that can all be reviewed. Although there are 4 dispatchers, I think at this point we use 3 to 3.5, because one of them, or even 1.5 of them, do certifications. All of our bus drivers need to maintain their license and have to have so many hours of education every year. So we have people who have licenses for that. So they work a few hours as a dispatcher, and then they work doing the training. But we go, now that it's under our roof, we go from 6 a.m. all the way till 9, 10 p.m., depending on where games are and whatnot. And there's someone manning a phone. If a bus breaks down, you know, they have to get in touch with someone. So one of the dispatchers, actually on Saturdays, we have so many things going on Saturdays, they, from their home, have their phone ready and prepared if something happens with a bus, whether you have to get a mechanic or a tow truck or get a replacement bus out. That's, again, I don't know how First Student did theirs, whether they had a central office that they paid one person that handled the whole region to do that, but we're our own entity, so, but we can look at all of that.
It definitely has to be looked at.
Yeah. We can have Dr. Murray come in and go through it all.
I think it would only be fiscally responsible for us after what we've been through this week to take a look at everything that's on the table.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Does anybody else have any other comments, questions? Okay, so at this point, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year '24 net school spending for the budget request of $219,868,010 as proposed by the Finance Committee of the School Committee and recommended to the mayor, that the mayor consider this funding request in his preparation of the City of Brockton's fiscal year '24 mayor's recommended city budget. Further, I would also like to entertain a motion to approve this fiscal year '24 non-net school spending budget in the request of $14,778,712 as proposed by the Finance Committee of the School Committee and recommend that the mayor consider this funding request in his preparation of the City of Brockton's fiscal year '24 mayor's recommended city budget. I need a motion.
I just have a question. We're ready to do that tonight?
We're ready to basically say this is what we need for our funding, because then, once we find out what the city gives us, we can go back and make whatever adjustments we need.
So you're recommending that?
Yes. Yes.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Who was the first?
Huh?
I know we need a first.
Oh, I thought you just did
I'm
that.
recommending, I would like to entertain a motion, but as I need a motion from the floor, and then you can second it.
So moved, the motion that you just read, because I can't read all that. Let you give
No,
me the
agreed.
paper.
Seconded.
Thank you. So properly seconded by Mr. Homer and first motioned by Ms. Sullivan. So thank you. Can I get a show of hands? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. Do we have anything else on the agenda? Other business? Does anybody else have anything else that they would like to bring up? Okay, thank you. Then I'm going to do a roll call. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Can I get a second? Second, and get a show of hands. Okay, thank you.